Palm trees, sunshine, and Disneyland. Can you even imagine this place has any room for the dark paranormal? Well, there may just be. Grab a blanket, turn off your lights for 3 Florida ghost stories. And you thought the worst part was the lightning. Feeling creepy in Central Florida. Throughout my life, I have been fascinated with ghost stories, but I've never actually experienced one myself. I live in Central Florida. 4 years ago, I moved in with my then boyfriend, now husband, about an hour away in a small rural town. He has lived in the home for 16 years. Before I moved in, he told me about 2 specific experiences he had in the home. Both times he was alone in the home, asleep in his bed, when he was abruptly woken up. An old woman was at the foot of the bed, staring at him. He didn't sense anything evil with the woman, and promptly fell back to sleep both times. I was amazed he could actually fall back asleep after being in the presence of what he thought was a ghost. After I moved in, we had 2 separate paranormal experiences, about a month apart. First, around 2:15 a.m., our fan light, which is always turned completely off every night, turned on all by itself. We woke up, blinking at the bright flood of light, confused. The very next night, at the same time it happened again, I started to worry. He told me to relax and that it was nothing but an electrical fluke. It never happened again. About a month later, we were again asleep and the TV in the living room turned on all by itself, with the volume turned all the way up. As many of you may be familiar with, modern TVs take 3 remotes and pushing 9 buttons to even turn them on, much less with full volume. We turned the TV off and went back to sleep. Amazingly, the next night at the same time, the TV turned itself on again at full volume. I was really freaked out and insisted that we call a priest if it happened a 3rd time. It never happened again. The house has been relatively quiet after those instances. I began to forget my worries about ghosts. Last Friday, I had my first real experience seeing a ghost. I do not know what time it was, but it was well after everyone in the house was asleep. Something woke me up and I looked at the foot of my bed to see a dark figure sitting there. It was dark, and I did not have my glasses on, so I could not see the figure. But I got a sense it was a male. My husband is often restless at night, and I assumed it was him. The figure rose and walked to the door. I don't remember the door opening. I flipped over in bed and saw my husband fast asleep next to me. I jumped and sat straight up in bed. The room was empty. The next morning, I told my husband. He insisted I was dreaming, but I just don't believe I was. None of the encounters we experienced have felt evil, but it is creepy just the same. Bird out of hell. This is my first post on here. I have a weird story that I'm still to this day trying to get some insight on, so your comments will be welcomed. But negative comments, well, whatever. Before I start, a little background information. I was born in Haiti. My mother was into voodoo, and at one time, so was I. I don't really consider myself psychic, but my mom and I seem to know when things are going to happen, usually through dreams. Anytime I dream of something bad that's going to happen, it happens. My husband is a bit freaked out by this. I dreamt he had gotten into a car accident, and I told him this, and in 2 to 3 days, he actually did. I was living in an area called Little Haiti in Miami, Florida. This was an apartment building. We, my mother, sister, brother, and I, were staying in a 1-bedroom teeny tiny apartment. The apartment had somewhat of a little shelter and porch. Okay, so my family went out, and I can't remember where. I was 14, home alone and bored. My boyfriend at the time, Jean, called and asked if he could come over to chill, and I said okay. We had a couch and love seat outside the door of the apartment. So when he came 15 to 20 minutes later, that is where he sat. So we were chit-chatting when something kept telling me to look up. Look up. When I looked up, I noticed what appeared to be a medium-sized crow flying towards my direction. I was leaning up against the open door of our apartment. I thought nothing of it, as I assumed the bird was just going to fly up higher due to... it's a fucking bird. So I go back to my conversation, but that voice inside was nagging me. So I once again found myself focusing on this crow that now seems to be approaching at full speed as well, and it got a little closer. It didn't look like it was going to do a U-turn anytime soon. Something kept telling me to duck, duck, duck! The minute I ducked, that thing flew straight into our apartment. I was freaked out. I asked John if he had seen that because he was facing me, but he looked at me like I was crazy. He said he didn't see anything. I thought he was screwing around with me for the simple fact that it was impossible. I said, "Didn't you see the bird that just came straight for my eyes?" He said, No, I'm tripping. I was not. I didn't smoke weed, nor did I drink. I went into the apartment searching for the bird because there was only one way in and out, and that would be the front door. There was no open windows. I ripped that teeny tiny apartment apart, searching for this bird that I swore tried to rip my eyes out of my sockets. I searched and searched. Nothing. It was as if this thing just disappeared into thin air. Even after he moved, I searched for the bird's carcass and bones. Nothing. To this day, I'm 27 years old, and I still wonder if maybe I went crazy for 15 minutes. I swear on my brother's grave that this is a true story. I'm not crazy. I may have ripped the house apart like a lunatic, but I'm not crazy. I would also like to add, we had a cat. Not when this incident happened, who would always find a way out. We had rats, so the cat was always inside. We didn't let him out. But somehow, some way, every time we'd leave, lock the cat inside tightly, we'd come home to an empty apartment, the cat nowhere to be found. I always wondered how he got out. Like I said, no open windows. That apartment was always creepy. Inhuman Haunting. I'm a 29-year-old female, born and raised in New Jersey. When I was 14, I moved to Florida to live with my grandparents. I have experienced paranormal things ever since I was a child, but I'm only going to talk about the most powerful here. At some point, I may submit other stories, but I feel I need to get the weight of this particular account off my soul, more than anything else. When I was 18, my grandfather purchased a house in Central Florida, Leesburg. It was big enough for me, my grandfather, my mother, and stepfather to live in comfortably. I had felt a presence in my room from the first night. I knew it was an elderly man, and I would often see a shadow standing over my bed. I would get the feeling he didn't really like me being there, but I was never fearful or feel threatened. I found out later that the previous owner's husband was very ill for a long time, and he passed away in that room. At 21, I had a falling out with my stepfather and left the house. 5 years later, after leaving a bad relationship, I came home to my parents' open arms. My parents set me up in my old room. I was super happy at first, but something was different about the house. The feeling was dark. Strange things started happening at night. The instances started off small and escalated over time. The first thing I remember is lying in bed trying to sleep, and I felt something pull a few strands of hair out of my ponytail and lay them over my face. It startled me, and I brushed my hair back and looked for something it might have caught on. When I lay back down, it happened again and again until I firmly said, "Stop it!" A couple weeks go by, and again I'm in bed, trying to get to sleep, and I felt something grab my left foot. It was a hard clutch on my foot, like someone trying to yank you out of bed. It freaked me out enough to send me to sleep on the family room couch. After the grab, I would often feel something sit on the edge of the bed, or even crawl into bed with me. Not too long after that, I would also wake up with unexplained scratches and bruises on my legs and torso. Around this time, I noticed something I've never felt before in any house I'd ever lived in. Unexplainable dread. I would feel sick coming home from a friend's house. Just upon seeing the house, I started having a lot of trouble sleeping, especially at night, in that room. I continuously had nightmares, usually about killing myself, and among the grabbing, I would hear whispers that I could never understand. Another instance was in broad daylight. I was working on a project for a graphic design class. The house was quiet and I was the only one home. I walked out of my room to get supplies, and when I came back in, I was stopped dead in the middle of my room. Something screamed in my ear. It was an angry, wordless scream. I freaked and left to stay at my boyfriend's house. I never finished that particular project. As time went on, things seemed to get more vicious. If I could get to sleep at night, I would often wake up at around 3 a.m. just filled with dread. On one occasion, I felt so scared and so full of dread, I resorted to my Catholic upbringing and started to recite the Lord's Prayer. Before I got to Amen, I was punched in the guts by an invisible force. It knocked the wind out of me and put me in the fetal position. I remember crying and being so scared I couldn't move. I laid there as motionless as possible and waited for the sun to come up. After being back for almost a year, my best girlfriend was noticing I was not well and would often come visit. She would spend the night, and she would always get sick for no reason and be throwing up so bad she'd have to leave early. My boyfriend at the time had similar experiences. One night, his right eye went blood red, and he complained of a constant pressure headache. He decided to go home. He called me literally 2 minutes later while driving home to tell me his eye cleared up and his headache was gone and that there was something seriously wrong with my parents' house. A couple months later, I had the most terrifying experience to date. It was very late and I was in my room watching TV. I decided to try to go to sleep, so I turned the TV off and was about to reach over and turn off my lamp, but I couldn't move. I was completely paralyzed from the neck down. There was a pressure shift in my ears and I tried to call out for my mom because I knew she was still up watching TV in the family room, which was right outside my door. But barely a sound came out. Now very panicked, I tried screaming for my mom. Still, barely a scratch of voice came out. Then, my bathroom door began to slowly slide open. What came out was, and still, is unfathomable to me. It looked like an alien, crossed with a lizard. Its skin was scaly, gray, and dead, almost moldy looking. Its eyes were burning red coals. It had no nose or ears to speak of. It had long claws on the hands and feet, and it had a very hunched over posture. It came out of the bathroom and looked right at me. It hissed at me, revealing these long needle-sharp teeth. Then it turned and walked out of my room. I just opened the door and walked out. I remember the sound of its claws on the wood floor. I seriously questioned my sanity. When I could move again, I dashed out of my room and went to my mother. She immediately noticed I was shaken and asked if I was feeling sick. She then asked me what I went into the kitchen for. I never gone into the kitchen. I sat and began crying and telling her what had just happened. I guess I'm lucky in a way to have a mother who has also experienced paranormal things. I don't know if it was a demon. I still replayed it in my head over and over. I'm always searching for an answer, searching for someone who might have something similar. Not long after that, terrible life events unfolded. My grandfather passed away suddenly in the house. The house went into foreclosure. I found out the love of my life had been cheating on me. Then I was in a terrible car accident. Then loony bin for a short stay because I had basically lost my mind for a minute with all that's been going on. When I got back, my parents were in the process of packing and moving to a new house. I refused to go into the room alone or at night at all while packing. I felt a lot of things behind out of fear of whatever was there following me. Since then, I've been much happier, healthier, and a more stable person. I've never again experienced such fear and dread and harm in that magnitude. As far as I know, no other family has stayed in that house more than a few months. I still have paranormal experiences, but nothing like that. These days, I feel like I know what true evil energy feels like. Whatever it was, it's left its mark.